Welcome to the Everyday Apostle, where ordinary lives meet extraordinary faith. Join our host, Kendall Peterson, as we explore how everyday men and women bring the gospel to life wherever they live, work, and play. Let's dive into it right now.
Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the Everyday Apostle podcast. My name is Kendall Peterson. I'm the host of this wonderful show. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I get the joy of bringing inspiring stories of people who are actually trying to live their faith, bring Christ into the world, and live the Great Commission by spreading the gospel wherever they go. Such a joy to do that, and it's a pleasure to have you join the show. Today's episode is brought to you by the strategic consulting firm of Fugoid International. Did you know that success is not random? It actually follows a formula. Every successful organization does 7 things well. Now, Fugoid calls that the essential elements, and from strategy and growth to leadership and culture, we help both for-profit and nonprofit organizations achieve lasting success by mastering these core principles. If you're ready to align your business with purpose and to lead with impact, visit Fugoid.com. That's Fugoid, Fugoid.com to learn more. And as you can tell by the way I made that personal, that is my company. So please check it out. Now let's dive into today's show. Today on the Everyday Apostle, I'm excited to welcome a very, very special guest who I was blessed to meet through the young adult group at my church, St. Augustine Church and Catholic Student Center. My goodness, fumbled all over that. Here in Miami, Trish Vega, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kendall. Really glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, my goodness. I'm thrilled that you're here. So let me read your bio real quick so that we can do you justice. Trish is a passionate disciple whose journey has taken her from San Francisco to Miami. And she has dedicated nearly 8 years to full-time college campus ministry. Trish has a deep love for faith formation, particularly in the area of theology of the body, and she finds joy in uncovering the beauty of God's design in everyday life. Whether through her ministry, meaningful conversations over a good cup of coffee, or simply embracing the adventure that God continues to write for her, Trish lives with a contagious enthusiasm for her faith. I can't wait to dive into her story today, her experiences in campus ministry, and her insights on living boldly for Christ is exactly why I asked her to join me on the show. So, Trish, welcome to the show once again. Where do we get started with you? Let's go all the way back. Let's go back to San Francisco.
Yeah, San Francisco. I grew up in a suburb outside of San Francisco with my parents who were Filipino immigrants, and they just loved California. So I loved it. I still love San Francisco. I think it taught me a great appreciation for natural beauty and so many cultures. There's so many places, people from all over the world, different foods that are there. And it taught me to really be curious about the world. So I loved growing up there with my family.
So how long were you in that area?
I lived there until I went to college. So I lived there from birth until coming here to Miami. I went to the University of Miami, and that was really my first time outside of the San Francisco Bay Area bubble, which was fun, another adventure for me.
Right. Was it weird getting used to the water being on the other side of town?
That was so strange. It was such a weird concept to me that the ocean could be warm.
Oh, yeah. Definitely not warm in San Francisco.
No.
So obviously, in your bio, we talked about, how you devote your life to God in so many ways. Is that something that has been a part of you your entire growing up, or did that come later?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, I'm really grateful that I grew up in an environment where I never doubted that God existed. My parents, I did come from a culturally Catholic background. However, it wasn't something very emphasized in growing up. I knew God existed, but I wasn't married to the idea of God in a Catholic sense. I think that's partly out of a out of the culture of San Francisco, being surrounded by so many different spiritualities and learning about that. And then also just from my parents' approach to faith at the time wasn't very, it left a lot for interpretation. So it really wasn't until I came to the University of Miami and encountered St. Augustine's, our church, and the campus ministry there that I learned a lot more about Jesus and the Catholic faith. And it demystified a lot of things for me. And that's when I started making the decision in that direction.
Okay. So when you were growing up, did you guys go to church? Did you try different things?
Yeah, we went to like Catholic churches growing up, but occasionally it was we went on Sundays unless we were in like Disneyland or I had like tournaments for sports or something. So we were I would say like in a sense culturally Catholic, but not actively devout, or it wasn't a personal thing. It was just like, oh, because we grew up doing it kind of thing.
Pretty much like most people.
Yeah, like a lot of Catholics. Yeah.
So what was your childhood like? What did you mentioned sports? Were you a big sports person? Or?
Well, I did. I was an artsy person / martial arts person. So I was very involved in the performing arts and in dance, singing, musical theater, all that stuff. And then I also did tournaments. I referred to were kung fu tournaments. My brother and I did a lot of martial arts growing up. But yeah, I was very much like passionate about like doing things. So that was very much, I think, the priority of my family when we, in the early years of how we spent our weekends and things. So it was fun, but also like, it was a different mindset than one that like prioritized faith.
Sure.
So,
yeah. So here you are, you decide suddenly that you're going to go all the way across the country to University of Miami. Talk to me about that decision. So you get to that point in high school where you have to start applying to colleges.
Right.
And where did you apply? What were you thinking?
Yeah, so much to my mother's chagrin, I chose the farthest place away from her. And it was really interesting going off of this value of like doing awesome creative things. I wanted to go into college studying music business and songwriting. It's something I was very passionate about, something I still am passionate about. And it's a program not offered in many colleges, at least at the time. So I just applied to wherever had it. And Miami happened to have a program that I loved and gave me the best scholarship. And that's honestly how I ended up at the University of Miami. But looking back, I see that it was a providential thing because I didn't know that Miami had a beautiful campus ministry. But I remember I wasn't even considering as a school, but I visited with my mom and I just like got this sense of like, I need to be here. I couldn't explain it. And I'm usually not that person. I'm usually a very rational, I need to think things through. Here are the pros, here are the cons. But both my mother and I, when we were walking around campus, we just had this sense of like, I just need to be here. And I really believe that was the Lord, like drawing me to come so that he could play things out later in my life. So.
Sure. Then he can use your musical talents, which is how I first was introduced to you. So, all right. So you arrive in UM and you're going to set the world on fire by writing great music and doing all of that. Then what happened?
Well, I went into UM not necessarily wanting to set the world on fire for the Lord. I went because I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to be famous. I wanted to tour. I wanted to do all those things. But what really started to shift my trajectory was I met somebody from the campus ministry, and I talked to her for like maybe like 2 minutes at the club fair that happens. And I'm like, okay, I'll just sign up because whatever. And then I saw her like maybe a couple months later, and she like looked into my eyes and said like, Trish, like, she remembered my name, first of all, which was really striking to me. And then she just asked how I was doing, how I was getting used to college across the country. And I just registered that conversation as something different because she looked at me differently. And I could tell that she wanted to get to know me, not just because she wanted me to join her club. She just loved me. And I'm like, there's something about you that's different. And I don't know what it is. So I started to get to know her more. And she invited me to some things that the campus ministry was doing. And I realized they were all like that. And I'm like, why are you all so nice to me? And over time, I just got plugged into the community and learned, like, you love this way because of your faith. And I want to jump into that. So teach me more. So that really set a trajectory to helping me get involved in unraveling a lot of my misconceptions that I had about faith because of my, just my curiosity and not really having a lot of catechesis or learning. So it was, I'm so grateful for her and her reaching out to me.
That's amazing. It's interesting that, that's very similar to what happened with me. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that, I heard the 10 Commandments and suddenly my life changed, right? It was, or, somebody handed me a Bible and I read it cover to cover. It was in the love that I felt that was so unique and so personal from guys that I met at a retreat. And the fact that I was at a retreat was bizarre in the first place, but there was just something different. And I think, over and over and over, you hear people talk about that, right? People who truly love the Lord and try the best they can to live that way, have a different way of interacting with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and totally. You mentioned earlier about theology of the body, and I think that's why I fell in love with this teaching from John Paul II that really focuses on like the theology of things that are human, that are experiential. And hearing your story, that aspect of your story, and looking at my life, like God comes to people in lots of different ways, but I think I've been so convicted time and time again of like God wants to reach into our human experience. He came to me in my desire and need for friendship, for someone to like see me when I was far from my family, for someone to walk with me in all the places that I had misconceptions that God was like distant or didn't care about like human emotions or human experiences or human feelings. And he's like, no, I'm actually in all of that. And I think her interaction was a gateway for me to discover that in deeper ways. And I'm like, oh, if this is God, who God really is, and if this is who the Catholic Church says who he really is, then I'm like, okay, maybe I should stick around and check this out.
Yeah. And that's the unique thing about Christianity, right? Is we don't have to go off somewhere else to seek God.
Yeah.
He comes to us.
Yeah.
Where we are, in the way that we are, in the way that we need to hear him, in the way that we need to see him and experience him. And like when you get that discovery, it's profound.
Yes, truly.
So you're involved in the youth group, and you still want to be a rock star, obviously, right? Because who doesn't want to be a rock star? So how does that progress through college for you? Yeah.
So later on, I think it was my junior year of college, I was on that trajectory. I was in a band. I was touring. We were negotiating some contracts and things, and I was living the life. And I remember I was on tour in Nashville with some of my bandmates, and I remember there's this one night after a show, and I was like, I don't love this. I don't love this as much as I thought I would. And I was diving more deeply into my faith, learning more about it, and I'm realizing that I would go play shows at night, but then I would like leave my bandmates. I'm like, hey, you guys go party and celebrate. I'm going to go to bed so I can go to mass in the morning with the Dominicans. And I'm like, this is weird. Why? I'm living everything that I thought I would want. But now I don't want it as much anymore. And I want to be in prayer and like learn about God more. And I learned too, I loved having conversations with people about like getting to know their hearts and their desires, and sharing that there's hope for fulfillment of their desires in someone who wants to meet them there and fulfill it abundantly. And I loved those more. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think I found something that I love more than music. I still love music. I still loved playing, but I'm like, I wasn't willing to sacrifice for it, whereas I could sense in myself, like, I'm willing to go the lengths to share with people what has been shared with me. And I think that started a trajectory of like, I think I want to do this for my life. And I got to know some missionaries from an organization called Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University students. They came to our campus the semester after my summer of touring. And I'm like, I think that's it. I think that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't know that I wanted to do. So it was kind of nuts.
It is, and it's usually nuts, right?
Yep.
You have
Yep.
this dream that you build up your whole life, and then, God even just removes that desire from your heart.
Yeah.
And in your case, obviously he still wants you to enjoy the music and wants you to glorify him with your talent.
Yeah.
Right? But the other things that you think go with it, they're not there anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say he didn't necessarily like remove it from me. I think he just showed me more.
Mm.
I think he saw I desired it, and he's like, I know you want it and I know you desire it, but I also want to expand your desire and let me show you that there's something you still want that, but can you imagine wanting something even more? So it's cool that like he honored that piece of me that still wanted to be famous or rock star, but he's like, let me just like expand it and put it in a greater context, which I feel very loved by God in. Like he didn't take away the desire for me to be a rock star, because later on when I became a full-time missionary with Focus, I happened to be entrusted students who were working in the music industry. I was a missionary up in New York for a little while, and I worked with a lot of students who were in like recording studios playing shows, and that's what I got to do with them. So it's just cool that he still answered that desire, but in a way that I wasn't anticipating or could have imagined.
And only he could answer it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for it. It was just like, boop, here.
Amazing. So how do you call back home and tell your parents that your lifelong dream is going to look a little different?
Great question. I remember actually on that tour in Nashville, I called my parents and I'm like, hey, I think I want to be a full-time missionary. And they were like, excuse me? I'm so grateful for my parents. They have never forced me into a specific job, or they very much like where your heart is where like, where like things will follow, where money will follow. But I think this was a bit much for them. They're like, we already took a risk on you going to music school. Now you want to give it all up and fundraise your salary for like Jesus? And I'm like, yeah. So at first I think it was a bit of a shock, but I let them sit with it. And God has been so good. He really just let them sit with it for a while. And then they came back to me like in conversations later, and they're like, okay, we'll support you. We're nervous, but we'll support you. If this is truly what like you feel called to do, then do it. And then by the time that I had said yes to being a missionary and I was going into my fundraising stint, they were like my biggest supporters. They're like, we're going to tell everybody, like we are going to put everything behind you. And I'm like, wow, this is God, because I didn't convince them. I didn't do anything. It was just like they came to it on their own. So yeah, it doesn't always happen that way. So I'm really grateful for my parents' docility and being willing to like wrestle with it with God on their own. So
you leave Miami and then go to the other extreme of the United States, which is the Northeast. So you're up there for a while.
Yes.
What brought you back?
Yeah, so I was with Focus for 5 years, serving in New York City and then Massachusetts, and then I worked in their headquarters in Colorado for a year. And then I just perceived a invitation from the Lord. He's given me so much experience in working with Focus and ministry. And but I had this desire to like, okay, like I want to continue serving the church in a way that is very specific to my love for formation and theology of the body. In Colorado, I was working on the team that helped plan the formation for all of the missionaries, all of the new missionaries that come into focus. And I'm like, I love this, but I want to work like more on the ground and help create a plan of formation that's like closer and specific to a community. And honestly, I didn't know what that was. I wasn't looking to leave Focus, but I asked 3 friends, like, hey, if you see, I could see myself living in Miami one day in the distant future. If you hear of an opportunity, let me know. One of those people was our friend Michelle, and she's like, call me. And I'm like, uh-oh. And then Michelle is the director of evangelization and campus ministry at St. Augustine's. And she's like, hey, basically, I was just talking to our pastor and we're looking to hire a campus minister and we want you. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So like, what are you thinking? In like a year or 2 or whatever? And she's like, oh, in like 4 months. And I'm like, oh. So I'm like, okay, I need to think about this. And I took it on my end and shared it or sat with it in prayer. And I'm like, wow, this actually is perfect. It's returning to a community that I love, a community that formed me. And I think is very specific to the ways that the Lord is calling me to give and the ways that he's gifted me. And then I'm like, I think I want this, but here's all these last minute things I need to do. And like God does when he wants something to happen, he just made everything fall into place. And I'm like, well, this is clear. All the logistics were put into place when I wasn't expecting it to. I have no reason to say no. So I'll go. And I did.
So how long have you been back now?
I've been back for about 1.5 years now.
Okay.
Yes. And it's been incredible. It's been so incredible to see and to help contribute to a community that really that formed me, and to see what God has done in the interim of me not being here too, to see how he's retained his spirit of what I saw him doing here in terms of building up the church and building up his family of God. The spirit's the same, but I'm also seeing like, whoa, God has done so much, and I'm so lucky. I'm so blessed that he has given me the opportunity to continue to be a part of it because, he didn't have to. So, yeah, he didn't have to do that for me.
So you have mentioned a couple of times, and it was also in your bio, theology of the body.
Yeah.
Now, I'm familiar with that, and I know many people are, but there's probably quite a few who are not. So can you give a brief overview of that and then lead into why do you think that's so important to you?
Yeah. So theology of the body is really, it's a series of speeches that Pope John Paul II put together over a few years to talk about, to share about how God's design and the story of himself, theology, is written into our humanity, our bodies. So, and it's been compiled together in a teaching that is utterly stunning. And it really is the breaking open of the intimate marriage of what's human and what's divine. And I think that was so groundbreaking for me, especially in my early years of reversion or learning about my faith, because I think I grew up with this idea that Christianity and the church hates the body. I grew up with this idea that like God doesn't care about like the weird parts of me, like whether I'm emotional or like my sexuality or like all of these things, that's just like taboo for God. So to have that message be flipped on its head on like all these places that I think God doesn't care about, not only does he care about them, but he's actually created them to tell the story of heaven and eternity and of the greatest love story ever. I'm like, whoa, that is so cool. Something so little and something I perceive as so like too small or like too gritty for God. God's like, no, I'm in there. I think it was very healing for me in my journey, in correcting a lot of my view of how I view myself and how I view how God looks at me.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because the term gets thrown around,
Yeah.
and more people should really kind of dive in there, because like
Yeah.
you, what I found remarkable was just that the way you articulated that was beautiful, in to think that we kind of we have our bodies and we have our feelings and we have everything that makes us human.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to think that God is separated from that, because God's God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's not human.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the process of becoming human, right?
Yeah.
Through Jesus and all of that, you can learn so much. So I'm going to put in this episode, I'm going to definitely put a link to more information about theology of the body, because
Awesome.
I think that would be wonderful for the listeners to explore that and kind of see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we get closer to the end here, as I reminded you at the beginning, it goes very fast. It's hard in this world to openly live your faith if you want to live in the world in the way the world defines it, right? And the people who don't are we're different and we're viewed differently, right? There can be a happy marriage between the two, and you can be pretty mainstream. I run a business and all of that, but it's hard, and I would say probably harder on a college campus to a certain degree, right? Where everybody's at that phase in their life where they're trying to explore who they are and what they are and answer all kinds of questions, and the megaphones that are pointed at them to tell them things that just are blatantly untrue or are pretty prevalent. So how do you navigate that, either in campus ministry directly as a focus, missionary, or in your role, or just how do we, even as a parish yoked to a college campus or university, how do you live with that?
Yeah, I think a college campus can be a very polarizing place of people from all walks of life coming together in one space and being quite vocal about it. I think it could be very challenging. I think I also view it as one of the most beautiful opportunities, because college students are, there's lots of wrestling and lots of identity figuring out, which can lead astray, but it also means they're so curious and so open and so desiring to know what's good and true. And I think one of the principles I love about theology of the body is John Paul II talks about this idea of personalism, of really trusting the human experience. And if we are truly made in the image and likeness of God, something about our human experience will always point towards him, even if it's twisted. So I love being on a college campus for that very reason, because I can have, college students are willing to have dynamic conversations. And as long as we have an attitude of curiosity, even in the face of opposing opinions, we can usually come to a place of at the root, we're all looking for love. At the root, we're all looking for acceptance, to be seen and to be known. At every desire, that is the distillation of it. And that always and only points to God. So I think as long as we can, as we are brave and curious enough, and I think that's what my students have modeled to me, and what I've learned is having the courage to enter into the messiness of it and be able to point at the root of whatever is being said, and being we all just want to be loved. God's there. And then it's really awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for articulating that. And we're at the end of our time, unfortunately, because I could probably go on for another hour easily and explore. Trish, thank you for sharing that, and for sharing your personal story and all of that, and for the nice overview on theology of the body. So I'll definitely put links. So grateful to Trish, to all of my guests that I have, for people taking the time to have these conversations. Really, really special to me. And for the messages I get of support, the people asking questions, the people who engage in this medium, which I never expected. I just want you guys to know that I'm very, very grateful for that. I do want to acknowledge our producer, Rachel, today, who is back with us. She's been, I thought she fired me, and she's been gone for a couple of weeks. So thank you, Rachel. A big shout out to Michael and Grant Miller for your support of this show. And for the rest of you, for the listeners, for the viewers, stay in prayer, stay true to your journey, and just know that God always loves you. Amen.
Thanks for tuning in to The Everyday Apostle. Don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube, on your favorite podcast outlet, and at our website at everydayapostle.com. Until next time, stay blessed.